Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation Board meeting for the month of March. It's March 21st, 6 p.m. My name's Dennis Stedman. We have 4 of the 5 board members here. One is traveling and absent, but we do have a quorum. If I could just ask each board member to quickly introduce themselves. We want to start, Dan?
Dan Bankowski, treasurer.
George Hines, secretary.
Sean Carney, member.
Very good. Thank you. And welcome to anyone who's watching. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of January 17th. We did not have a February meeting, so those are our most recent minutes. For that, I'll turn it over to George, our secretary.
Thanks, Dennis. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes as circulated to the board when they were all documented back in February.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so the January 17th meeting minutes are officially approved.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, George. Next on our agenda, and we're going to try to move briskly because I know, Sean, you need to depart at 6:45 or thereabouts, or?
Yeah, about 6:40, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your fitting us in here. Dan, the treasurer's report.
So we just had 4 items. So this is going back a little bit longer than just to make sure that we covered everything. We had an invoice in January from Corcoran Landscaping for 2 days of work at Stackhouse. That was for $2,000 that we paid. In March, we had an invoice for $179 to Mid-Atlantic Printing. This was for the signage that we are using for the deer stands and for the hunters. And then another invoice in March for 5 days of work. This is work around Makefield Brook for $5,000 for Corcoran Landscaping. And then one final Corcoran Landscaping invoice for $2,500 for 2.5 days. This was some additional work at Makefield Brook and some additional work at Leadham. So those were all paid. And I think it might be the second or third action or next item on the agenda that we can cover kind of what's left then for that winter work for Corcoran Landscaping, but nothing else from my side.
Very good. Any questions or discussion on those expenditures?
No.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dan.
Dennis, maybe I just add and prelude into what Sean will talk about is that, but basically all of our work here for Corcoran was kind of prearranged at preset fees, just for anyone else that's listening.
Right. Yeah, we have a good relationship with Corcoran Landscaping. It's we contract with them for a set number of winter days when his business is naturally slower, and he can give us a much better price for those days to help keep his crews occupied when weather conditions are suitable. And so much of our buffer cleanup we do in that kind of off season, which has been a great savings. And Sean has managed that relationship, and it's working out very well. We're very pleased with both the services and the pricing from Corcoran Landscaping. Next, some property issues and updates. There's really only 2 properties this month to talk about. Makefield Brook two items actually at Makefield Brook. I just walked that this afternoon. Sean, you had asked me to do that and take a look at the buffer cleanup that was done there and see if there's any more days or time that we need at Makefield Brook. I have to say, I've never seen the buffer look nearly that good. I was so impressed. They did an excellent job. I mean, there was a number of trees that were kind of leaning into the buffer and into the field. They pruned appropriately. They took out exactly the kind of the problematic limbs and managed to keep, there's some integrity to the tree and didn't always just chop everything down. I thought they did it perfectly. In my estimation, we don't need additional time on Makefield Brook. I was just very pleased with that. And please give Cochran that feedback. I was impressed.
Very good. I will, Dennis.
Great. Separate from that, just in the last week or so, we had a tree fall behind a neighbor's property. One of our trees fell on our fence and kind of intruded into his property on Makefield Brook. Keith Ransom, he reached out to me. It was during that period of high winds that we had a week or two ago. It was on a Friday or Saturday, I don't recall right now. Cochran was out there on Monday, checked out the situation. I looked at it today. He cut up the tree that was that had fallen. I think it's all in good shape. I texted our neighbor Keith. He's happy. He said no, so that's all done. So I appreciate that. That was, I think we reacted in a timely way for our neighbor, and that seemed to work out well. So that issue is resolved. Other property issues, turn it over to Sean for Leadham.
Sure. We'll just go through a couple real quick, Dennis. So, as Dan mentioned at the outset, as a prelude to this, we set up our winter projects with Corcoran earlier in the year. 1 day allocated on Farmview Drive or Leadham's Farm, 2 days allocated on Leadham's Drive over on Stackhouse Farm, and 5 days allocated to Brentwood Road, Makefield Brook, which, as you recall, was a leftover project from last year. So that was actually the focus project for this year. So I'm very happy to hear that the 5 days spent there went well. The crew said they were 5, quite long days. They did come across a couple of things that they kept me in contact about, but all in all, it sounds like that was a success. The 2 days on Stackhouse, I believe George saw that work before he left. All looked good. Trees all trimmed up, looked very nice. Well done. And then Farmview Drive. So Farmview Drive started out as a 1 day project. I had envisioned this to maybe be 1 day this year, 1 day the following year, 1 day the following year, to clean up down closer to the end of the farm. So we're talking 2088 to 2092 Farmview Drive. The crew came in and did 1 day's worth of work. Very good job. I then received an email from the township, which you are all aware of, where we had a neighbor at 2080 Farmview who wanted us to stop out and take a look at what they had going on behind their residence. Some overgrowth, some bushes growing from our side of the fence over through theirs, so on and so forth. So I met with the homeowner within 3 to 4 days. We came up with a plan. Corcoran came back out to finish up some work and incorporated a little better than a half day's work at this residence to take down a dead and dying tree, limb up another tree, and remove some of the bushes that were growing from our side, burning bushes from our side over onto theirs. While they were there, as you recall, last week was very windy. A large tree that was in the farming area actually came down during the night. They sent me a picture of it and said, Sean, all the equipment is right here. Should we just take care of this now? And I said, yes. A, it's in the farming area, and B, you're already there. So they took care of that. So one day at Leadham's farm actually turned into 2 days at Leadham's farm to take care of the 2080 Farm View fence line, as well as the tree that had fallen into the farm, which is now all cleaned up, very clean looking. I'm sure we'll see it when we go out for any tours. And it also gives the farmers direct access to that area with no problem. So that leaves us a half a day left. We can allocate it how we like. I don't think that we can go and attack either of the two small projects that we had noted if we had, say, 2 to 3 extra days. But I will now make those priority for next year. It's Fairfield area, some tree elevation over on Stackhouse that needs to be done, as well as Heather Ridge off of Trowbridge, where we've had some work done and a little more work needs to be done. I'll keep those for next year. But all of that work is done. We've been billed for all of it. If we have a half a day's worth of work we want to add somewhere, we can. If we want to kind of keep it in our pocket for another ad hoc thing, such as the tree falling that Dennis mentioned, we can do that as well. Dennis, I think while we're on this topic, just to add one more minute, I did have preliminary conversations with Tim Stewart about continuing the contract that we have with Corcoran Landscaping for the buffer cutting. This is completely separate from the winter work, but the buffer cutting, which takes place 4 times during the growing season, they maintain the buffer by cutting it. If there's any limbs or anything that needs to be taken care of, they help us with that stuff. Tim certainly seemed to be on board. Corcoran had 2 requests. One was for a longer contract, a couple of years. And the other was just that if diesel prices, gas prices went up above $5 again for a period of time, that they'd be able to add in a little bit of a surplus charge. Tim was, again, perfectly fine with each of those things. He needed to speak with Sam and come back to us. I haven't yet heard from him, but it's no issue because the buffer area is not quite growing yet. But just wanted to mention that we've had preliminary conversations. It seems like we'll be going in the same direction. I just don't have confirmation to that yet. When I do, I'll certainly send a note.
Well, that's terrific. This buffer approach of having Corcoran do the mowing and sharing the cost of that mowing between ourselves and the farming tenant certainly worked this past year, and I'm glad Tim Stewart's willing to continue that, because I think it took a lot off of his plate because he was struggling to get to as much mowing as was contracted. And it takes issues off of our plate with complaints and lack of follow-up, etc. So it seems like a win-win.
Agree.
Great. Thank you. Any other property issues that we should cover that anybody's identified or any neighbor reached out? Okay. Hearing none, let's go on to a policy decision. In the last couple years, I would say, this board has gotten more involved and active in managing the deer hunting that goes on these farm properties. Some of them have a fair amount of woods where that hunting is quite appropriate and necessary. In other cases, there isn't that kind of environment. But for those properties where hunting is appropriate, we wanted to be sure that the hunting was done in a responsible, safe way. And at this point, the only hunters that should be on farmland property are those that have permission from the farmer, the operator of the farm, as well as Farmland Preservation Inc. So we drafted a policy here. I'm sharing it on my screen. Is that being shown for everyone?
No,
Just the agenda, Dennis.
that's the agenda.
Okay, hang on. How about now? No,
No,
Okay.
nothing.
No,
Hang on. Share screen. I know I have it here somewhere. I just had it. Here we go. How about now?
There it is,
Yes.
Dennis.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's not the intention at this meeting for us to read through each bullet. Suffice it to say that Sean and I have kind of led this charge of trying to manage the deer hunting that goes on our properties. We drafted this policy, and I know it's been circulated to this board, and we've discussed it earlier and previously. I think the key point is that any hunter has to abide by all hunting, Pennsylvania game hunting rules, have our permission, and we need to know that the hunter is responsible and is going to be respectful of the property, respectful of the neighbors, and respectable to the land. So and to other hunters. So is there any discussion we want to have, further discussion or refinement to this policy? I did pass this document out to those hunters that requested red tags when we were distributing red tags about a month ago. I told each one that this was a draft, and I expected it to be final, but we could still change it. But I would say it was universally accepted as kind of a good idea, not a problem. The hunters that we have given permission to would adhere to these kinds of rules of the road, whether they were written down or not. But this gives us the ability to, if someone does violate a policy or is acting inappropriate in our judgment, that we take that permission away. So if any discussion whatsoever, hearing none, is there a motion to approve this policy as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Very good. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All right. So this is an official policy of Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation. I appreciate everybody's attention on that. It's I feel it's important. There is a tremendous amount of crop loss from deer damage in this area, and some of our fields are getting to a point of economic break even with the amount of loss that's caused by the deer, and we want to do what little we can to help our farmers remain viable. Okay, back to the agenda. I want to we had put on the agenda earlier the discussion of the holiday party, which we have each December, our board meeting. We invite key stakeholders, our farming tenants, key employees from the township, our township support staff, etc., to a holiday gathering party. This past year is at the Vault, and I thought it was a productive discussion. It builds relationships. People get to know each other. We're kind of working remotely oftentimes or by email throughout the year with this team, and it's just an opportunity to get to know each other a little better. The issue that was raised is paying for that. It was what we did is we took the total bill from the vault, and we divided that bill across the 5 board members. So we each paid out of our own pocket the cost of that evening. It wasn't that significant. It's some flatbreads and beers, but that was the approach. As that has gotten a little larger over time, one thought would be to handle the budget as follows. That is, divide the total bill by the number of people that were there. If you're dividing by 18 or 20 or 12, whatever it is, each director pays their per capita share, so that we're not at any time being entertained by our own budget, by our own funds at Farmland Preservation. But after the directors pay for themselves, the guests are paid for, but with Farmland Preservation funds, as a way, as seemingly a fair way to handle that holiday party. That's a thought. I'm interested in the board's view of that, or reactions, or alternatives. Not a big deal, but something that I think we want to, treat correctly, do correctly.
Well, you should make sure the supervisor liaison pays as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, John, you're absolutely right. And so now I think Farmland could, maybe it's not right, but I think Farmland Preservation may be willing to pay for the supervisor's per capita share as well. If the supervisor is willing to accept that. Now, maybe if that's inappropriate, please tell us, John.
No, I'll pay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, John. Other comments?
My only other comment, Dennis, really is the way we frame it. I think it should be framed as a year-end review, networking with our customers, our primary stakeholders, and not call it a party or anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, if we're doing it for business purposes, so
Right.
let's kind of do it as a year-end review and stakeholder networking and frame it that way.
That makes sense to me. Other reactions to that?
I think it's
Your
all very
description, by the way,
reasonable what you
is
laid out,
accurate.
Dennis.
Yeah. Sorry, Dan.
I was just saying, I think it was all very reasonable, what you laid out and the approach.
Okay. Sean, John, any other thoughts?
Nothing to add here, Dennis. I think it's well thought out. I felt bad for Dan this year, who had originally been able to attend and then wasn't able to, and then kind of got hit with the bill. So I do like the fact that we're going to divvy it up. Use the denominator. We'll pay our way for those reasons and for optics. To avoid any conflicts, and then the rest is paid for. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is easily paid with interest. This is a very small nominal amount at the end of the day.
It's incredibly reasonable, really. At the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we have some rules of engagement going forward for the 2023 year-end review and stakeholder networking meeting in December.
Very good.
I don't know if do we need to vote that we agree on this approach or something? I don't know.
It'll get captured in the meeting minutes that we all agreed to it. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to make any motions or anything like that.
Great. Thank you, George. At this point, I'd ask, is there any other business anyone wants to bring to the board? Anything brewing that we need to discuss?
I only had a
Dennis,
question, Dennis. I'm sorry, but you sent us an email the other day from your other committee work about
Yes.
definitions of preservation and restoring and restoration and stuff. Is that something we need to discuss down the road, or was that mostly just for information only?
That was for information primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dennis, one thing for other business, and it's not a conversation for tonight, I'd like to do a little bit more work on this before, raising it on the agenda, but just something to table. I understand that, before I came onto the board, a lot of the discussion in these meetings was about bamboo. And it's obvious that just by the smirks alone, it's great that we've made progress on bamboo, that's really not even a discussion any longer on this call. And I would say for a majority of my first year on here, we talked about buffer and buffer issues. And I think we're moving in the right direction there. We don't really talk about them in more than a couple of minutes on each call. So again, making progress there. I think something that we're going to have to address is our fencing in areas. As I walk the farms, there are some very, very bad fences, those that are down so much that the deer just step over it. Some where pieces are missing at the top. If a deer did go to jump it or a kid grabbed it, would kind of be dangerous in different instances. I just think that, and trust me, I understand, fencing is not a cheap thing that we have on these farms, but they were put in many years ago. Things have happened where trees have fallen on some, or people have climbed over them, or what have you. But, I think that as we walk our properties and take some notes about maybe where fencing should be addressed, that maybe we can do similar to what we've done with buffers. We can make a priority list of homes, where it needs to be addressed, and potentially work on it and piecemeal it out so that it's not one large bill that we have to suffer, but that we can do it over a period of time. But I do think there are areas where the fence is no longer acting like a barrier or a fence at all. It's actually just inviting to, whether it be animals, kids, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's an excellent point. I mean, walking these properties, there are places where the fence is in good shape and fine, and there's places where it's as you described. So I think as part of that discussion, we should also be thinking about and maybe collecting some information on is the type of fence. I mean, with the standard farmland preservation fence, and maybe Dan, who's been on the board
PennDOT Type 2 fencing.
What? So say that again.
PennDOT Type 2 fencing.
PennDOT Type 2 fencing. Great, thank you. Whatever that definition is, it's not an impressive fence, let's say, either in terms of strength or appearance. And so I think, Sean, you're raising a good point, and it may be appropriate to also to challenge what our standard fence is, PennDOT Type 2 versus PennDOT Type 1, or I don't know what all the choices are, and what the cost implications of that might be. But I think that should be on the table as well in this, on this topic.
And
I see. Go
so
ahead.
just for the notes then, right there, it's a policy, like an old policy, and I think we just need to revisit it, because I want to say it's a township policy perhaps that references this fencing to be used, but I think we're talking about something that was originally drafted 40 years ago. So I think it certainly should be, something that is reopened on what is the type of fencing that is used. I 100% agree. It is, I think we've heard it from neighbors, right? This is not an attractive looking fence at all.
Right. And attractive, I know, is going to get expensive, and that's one consideration, though, is what what is the attractiveness? What does it look like? And then what's its strength and durability? I mean, in many
And
places,
it is an addition. It's not attractive, but you're right as well. Is like it's not necessarily the most efficient in terms of its durability and strength as well, what you said earlier too, which is definitely true. Is definitely true.
and in many cases, many locations, I think the fence really represents not a fence, but a boundary line. I mean, because it could be stepped over, it could be climbed over. It's we want it to have better integrity than it has in many locations. I know. Now, as an example, in Makefield Brook, where I was today along Wheat Shaft Road, I mean, that fence is in the woods. It's literally in the woods. And every year there's new limbs and new challenges to that. And, keeping a fence up in the woods is almost impossible. So there are locations like that. And then there's locations where it's a wide open, clean vista between a yard and a buffer, and everything in between. So I think it is an area where we should spend some time and energy. Good suggestion.
Thanks.
You said a magic word earlier, Sean, bamboo. Do you want to, well, first, Dennis, at Makefield Brook, if you were there today, did you notice how the bamboo looked on our side of the properties?
Yeah, the major area there along the driveway where it was so invasive is still in good condition. The plastic barrier that was put down seems to have had a real impact, and the giant bed of crushed rock that retards the bamboo's ability to come up through it also seems to be working. I think because that was a real challenging area, and I'm admittedly a little surprised and impressed that it's still in as good a condition as it is, given now this is its 4th year, maybe something like along those lines. So it's held up. The control has held up.
So Sean, I can't even remember now. I think the answer is no, that Corcoran did not do any spraying or any specific work on the bamboo last year, right?
I believe that he did, Dan. I think that he billed us with maybe a buffer cleaning.
Okay.
But I can remember him mentioning that he was out spraying. Because he does it in a 2-day span where he puts the chemicals together and goes out and sprays. So I do think we're still being billed for that, and he's still maintaining it.
Okay.
I thought that was part of the plan, was that continued spraying at least twice a year in those few spots that were problematic.
Yeah, which is good because he's also doing he is now mowing those buffers in the exact same areas, which should be a part of that. The maintenance,
Right.
It was supposed to be part of the maintenance plan as well, right?
Right.
So I guess let's just keep on our radar, or we can also take a cue from Matt Corcoran if it is necessary this year to do any spraying or not. It wasn't all that expensive, really, I think, but he's out there as well. So it's, but I think we should just keep that on the radar of when does that need to stop? Back to the original advice, it's going to go on for years and years and years and years. So, and given that bamboo still exists on some of these properties on the neighbor's side, it's going to keep coming back our direction as well. So it might be unavoidable. So I guess just as we're rolling into the season here, people can just make sure they're thinking about the bamboo when they're walking around.
Yeah. I do think that given the cost of it, and it is not much, to have him continuously spraying is smart. I think taking any time off could open us up to growth. I did ask him at one point if we could marry the two, kind of the bamboo and the buffer. And he said, not really, Sean, because all I'm really charging you for with the buffer is my purchase of the chemicals, mixing them, and then it's different equipment because we have to go out there with a sprayer. I'm not doing it from my machine. But he said, that's basically the only cost for it. It's rather easy work.
Yeah, and it's my impression or belief that the reason we're not talking about bamboo as much, and when I came on this board, it felt like that was all we talked about, is because a few years ago we decided to take an aggressive approach on it and really attack it and do it right, and not try to nibble at it in small bites, because that just didn't work and it was a continuous issue. So I think taking the kind of the sledgehammer to it like we did is the way to go. And yeah, I don't think you want to let up on keeping that invasive plant smothered as best we can.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other business from the board? John, Lewis, any business from the Board of Supervisors before we go to public comment?
No, my only question is, are there residents with bamboo next to one of our buffer areas that we haven't addressed yet?
I think it's, I think your end of what you said there that we haven't addressed yet. So I think that every instance of bamboo has been addressed, and I know either a combination of Mike Blank, well, actually mostly all Mike Blank, has been in touch with the code enforcement officer at the township in a couple cases where it involved, having communications with the neighbor as well.
Okay, so yeah, Mike from code enforcement probably followed
Yeah.
up on that. Yep, awesome. Okay,
Okay.
just wanted to check.
I think we have two cases where we had bamboo come onto our property from neighbors' property. And I think in both of those cases, those neighbors still have bamboo on their property. They didn't get rid of it themselves off of their property.
But they have pushed it back away from ours.
Right. In accordance with township policy, I think.
Right.
As far as we're
Minus what's going on over on Farmview. What's the small one? Farmview 2?
This one.
Yeah, over on Farmview 2.
Right.
That one continues to encroach on our property. Corcoran calls every year to let us know that one's coming over. It looks like it jumped the barrier that they had put in at one point. And then when we did the fence work this year, we realized the fence was actually out too far. So where we wanted to go ahead and put the fence, where the actual line is, there was bamboo there. So that's one that continues to encroach on our property. I don't believe they've had much success, with getting that one taken back where it needs to be.
Okay.
On that one, can you send me the property owner? I can check in on that one.
I
Absolutely.
think we might have an email chain on that Mike Kirk might be on as well.
Yes. He reached out one or two times to the homeowner with no response. That was the Sunnyside Lane residents.
All right. So now that it's spring, we want to remind Mike Kirk to maybe follow up. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think we should.
Definitely.
Okay. That property, that's Mike Blank's property, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you,
I think I have an email here. Just trying to find the email, but we may need to ask Mike to search his inbox for the latest email on this.
I'll send an email to Mike asking him to kind of share with us his latest email chain so that we can follow up. Okay.
I have something from July 18 last year. But I don't think we see any response back from Mike Kirk, but there could be correspondence between Mike Kirk and Mike Blank there.
Right. Yeah. I'll reach out to Mike. It's not an urgent matter. He may take some days to respond, but we'll we'll catch up on that so that we can follow up with code enforcement. Okay, thanks, John.
Mhm.
Okay, for our speaking to our live meeting broadcaster, are there any public comments?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you. Review of action items, George?
There's not too many of them. The ones that I have down, Sean, you're waiting to hear back from Tim Stewart regarding the buffer contracts and maintaining Corcoran for the buffer work. So as soon as you hear back from that, you can just let us know, but I'm sure they're gonna do that. A future agenda item is to discuss fencing status and what I've called infrastructure issues. And we want to put that on a future agenda. I think Sean said you wanted to kind of follow up on a few things and do a little bit more research before we put it on as an agenda item, but we could probably do that in either April or May. And then the last item here that I have, Dennis, is you're going to follow up regarding some of the Sunnyside Lane bamboo issues. I wasn't sure whether you were following up with Mike Kirk or Mike Blank.
I was going to email Mike Blank
Okay.
to catch us up on the latest communications,
Okay.
and then depending on the status of that, we'll follow up with Mike Kirk if necessary.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay. All right. Any? I like this. It's 6:41. I know, John, you're a little jealous because your Board of Supervisors meetings sometimes are more than a full hour. And
Sometimes.
I think the record is 2 a.m, but yes.
Oh. Okay. Well, hopefully that was Zoom, so everybody could have some wine on the side. All right. If no other business, I make a motion, we adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a
Seconded.
second? Very good. All in favor?
All right.
Adjourned.
See you
Thank you.
guys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you, Janelle. Thank you, Janelle, for all your work. We appreciate it. All right. Good night.